City of Cape Town has published a draft integrated human settlement strategic plan outlining the city's human settlement plan for the next 5 years. The public has been encouraged to look through the plan and submit their comments about the plan, but there are concerns that are being raised around this plan. Robyn Park-Ross, researcher at Ukwazi, joins us now to highlight some of those concerns. Robyn, good evening, and thank you very much for your time. You've seen the plan, the strategic plan. What is missing? You're saying it's a little bit scant on details?
Yes, good evening, and thank you so much for having us on the show. So first, I just want to set the context a little bit. Some of the facts and figures that this plan give us really lay out what the situation that we're dealing with in Cape Town at the moment. So first, the city tells us that there's about 360,000 people on the city's housing waiting list. They also say that about 76% of Cape Town's residents earn below 22,000 Rand a month. This is households. And yet only 34% of homes in Cape Town actually cater to this income bracket. And going forward, they say, you know, because there's this huge disjuncture between what people actually earn and how much housing costs in Cape Town, that for the next 20 years until 2040, we're going to see 53% of homes built in Cape Town being informal. So it's really a dire situation. It's a housing crisis. It's a crisis of housing affordability. And it's in this context that the city is having to propose what it's going to do about this in the next 5 years. And it's because of this reason that one of our concerns comes about. So first we see this major shift from providing housing to people, so a house as we know it, to providing service sites or service stands. So this is actually a directive that came from national government during COVID that was sent out to provinces and municipalities to say we're now shifting to this new direction. And part of the motivation here is really at acknowledging the scale of the problem in South Africa and in Cape Town specifically where we are. So this major shift will make a huge difference in people's lives. What it means is that people that have been on the housing waiting list for years, maybe for decades, waiting for a home, a house, an actual structure, are likely to be given a service site. And what this means is it's a piece of land and it's connected to services like electricity and water. Yeah. The only people that will be getting B&G, the freestanding houses going forward from the city, are people with disabilities, elderly people, and child-headed households. Yeah. So this is a really huge change that will really impact people. Yeah. And in some ways, there's a positive aspect to it in that it has this motivation for providing access to land for as many people as possible.
A lot of people, Robyn, have been calling for service stands, saying to government, give us service stands, we'll build for ourselves, we've been building in any case. But you are concerned that there is no process that is outlined as to how exactly these service stands firstly are going to be put in place and how they're going to be distributed.
So as you mentioned before, with the plan in general, there are some places where detail and specific projects are outlined, but overall we are concerned with the lack of detail and specificity. Essentially, this is an implementation plan. It's meant to provide the who, where, how, and funding answers of how this will actually happen in the next 5 years. And so, for example, if we look at the service sites, we're really not getting to that level of detail. So we do have exactly that concern of how this will exactly happen. But added to that with the service sites, as you mentioned, this will work for some people, and it will mean that the state can provide more, greater numbers. But what's important is that service sites are already part of housing provision, and what we really need is flexibility. We need different options that may suit different families. So what we're hearing, for example, from our community partners who already have experience with service stands or sites is that for many, many people, this doesn't work because it shifts the onus, the responsibility to build your home onto you, which means you have to have the time, the resources, and the skills, the know-how to actually build your own home. And this just simply will not work for everybody. It also isn't coming with the necessary resources and capacitation that we would want to see alongside this type of shift that would provide assistance to people needing to build their own homes. So the government has a housing program already called the Enhanced People's Housing Process, which essentially is meant to it's a model where people are meant to be able to build their own homes, but with some kind of capacitation, support, technical assistance. And we're really not seeing that aspect in this shift to service sites, which is concerning.
Yeah. The criminalization of unlawful occupation is something that is of concern for you. This as the city plans to move 15,000 people from what they call the city transport reserves. Are they saying where those people are going to go? But also, what are they saying about this criminalization of illegal occupation?
So essentially, this plan that we're speaking about this evening is really it's not the only place where we're seeing this. In general, the city's attitude to unlawful occupation is very harsh. It's about policing, security, and we've seen that primarily in something called the unlawful occupation framework. So that's referenced in this plan, but that's the main place where basically we're seeing the criminalization of housing needs. So we know that during COVID, there's been a extreme or a sharp increase of land occupation across the city. And we know that this relates directly to people losing work, to people losing income, not being able to pay rent or keep up with housing costs. And yet the city's response is this very harsh crackdown response, which essentially makes people, for the first time since apartheid, it makes it a criminal offense to occupy land in this way. And that doesn't just apply to the people themselves who occupy land, it also applies to people who are involved in the situation. Let me give you an example. In the unlawful occupation bylaw that the city recently put into place, it makes somebody transporting housing materials at risk of being either arrested or fined. So this really creates a very concerning situation where law enforcement officers in the city with very little training get the full responsibility to go around the city and first decide that they get to make the call, where people live, which is a home, which is a structure, and that will depend whether they have to follow a court proceeding for an eviction if it's a home, or if they deem it as a structure or that nobody's living there or it hasn't been occupied for long enough, then they can basically confiscate people's materials. But also if you were driving down the road in your car transporting materials that are even, housing materials, but also materials that could be interpreted as housing materials, you might be at risk of being seen as a criminal. So it really comes with this harsh crackdown kind of attitude on a situation which is actually based in the state's own failure to address the housing crisis and the way that housing crisis has been drastically exacerbated during COVID. So we'd want to see proactive solutions of how do we respond. I mean, this city is meant to be a caring city. We would want to see proactive solutions that provide affordable housing, flexible solutions for households in Cape Town, and instead we're seeing this securitization, harsh kind of criminalization of people.
Right. Robyn Park-Ross, appreciate your time and bringing us this researcher at Ndifuna Ukwazi there on the Integrated Human Settlement Plan that is being put in place by the city of Cape Town. I'm sure we'll hear more on that as more people are submitting their views on that particular plan.